The latest polls show Arizona's races are neck and neck.
How did the pundits and the poll watchers get this election so wrong?
Many Americans may be wondering about the polls and their accuracy.
So did political polls miss the mark this midterm? Now that the dust has settled, we are taking a closer look. The 2016 and 2020 elections shook public faith in polling, some even declaring the death of political polls. That drove some big changes in the industry. Now that the dust has settled, we're looking into the midterm poll results and what's next. How much should we trust political polls?
The questions about polling, is it dying, not used? I don't buy it one bit.
Pollsters are making their case after what many political scientists, including Larry Sabato, called the most accurate results in several cycles.
The polls were much more accurate than they were in 2020 or 2018 or 2016.
But there are detractors, as we've seen in Arizona.
Folks kind of glom onto what they want to believe. And I remember a lot of folks I talked to after the election, like, I can't believe that race was so close. And I'm like, why?
Arizona pollster Mike Noble says a new glut of partisan polls created what he calls a red mirage, while his and other nonpartisan polling companies anticipated very tight races.
It's the voice of the people. Like, a lot of decisions and everything get made on this, and yet they kind of get demonized with polling. And I think it's just due to a couple bad actors.
There are also fewer polls. Analysis site 538 reports 12 years ago, about 1,700 polls for Senate, House, and governor between May and late October. This midterm, about half that. Many of the most reliable names, like Gallup, have left political polling. The price of being wrong is high, and it's getting harder to collect a sample that really represents voters. Noble's team has a 56-step process for every poll.
Yeah, so I think it's adapt or die.
That pivot from decades of phone polling to text and online had to happen fast to reach younger voters who had a big impact this election.
Even though they're a smaller group, the huge disparity between of them going Democratic or Republican essentially offset the Republican gains.
One nagging peril of polling, low response from certain groups such as Hispanic Latino voters.
They very much get treated like a monolithic group, and they're actually far more nuanced.
Some pollsters simply account for those they think are not responding, like Trump voters underrepresented in 2016 and 2020 polls.
They disproportionately do not trust the media and do not trust polls, and they won't participate in them.
Sabato says this cycle there were fewer nonpartisan polls, while more than 80 polls came from right-leaning groups, 20 from left-leaning ones.
They're put out there to sell a particular party, a particular candidate, a particular ideological line. So you're not getting the full story.
If it's so troublesome, do we really need political polls?
Why is polling so important beyond just the horse race attraction of it?
Again, the people, it's the ultimate check and balance between those that are in power and those that aren't in power.
Noble says polls help government better serve communities by knowing what we do and don't want. And what's the alternative?
Can the issue with polls be fixed, or do we need to move on to a whole different way of measuring public opinion?
I wouldn't object at all to not abolishing polling, but having it supplement other forms of analysis.
His suggestion, look to trusted sources for context. Look for transparency. Don't take polls at face value, but do take them.
Their voice is important. They're actually standing for thousands, and in the national case, maybe hundreds of thousands of voters, each person who's polled. That ought to give you a sense of power.
We'll have the links to the data we mentioned with this story on our website. We'll be right back.